Chris, it's Russ Brown. I know you're going to talk about your two recruits, but you talked about hoping to get a frontline player / backup center. Are you still feeling you've got a shot at one, or how are you approaching that?
Well, as you know, the transfer portal is always fluid, and the last thing that we want to do is take a student athlete, take a player that's not capable of helping us. So we'll determine the best course of action, as days develop. Again, we're going to continue to try to get the best player that we can for our roster. So that's a need that we think we have, but we also have plenty of capable players that if we have to play differently, we'll do that. We're not going to take a player that's not.
ESPN 680, WHBC Newburgh and 105.7 WHBC FM.
Next question.
Coach, this is Kent Taylor from Wave. Can you just take us through the process of landing Charles? I would imagine, obviously he wasn't on your radar maybe until Jay decided to go to the NBA, and then it kind of happened pretty fast.
It did happen awfully fast, Kent. It's one of those things where we received word from Jay's father that he was not going to be attending Louisville, that he was going to go ahead and sign with an agent and, enter the NBA draft. So that at that point, we convened as a staff, sort of like we're doing here today, and put all the options on the table, and said we got to try to figure out somebody that can help us in the backcourt. And so, our assistants and myself poured over tape, looked at who was available in the transfer portal. Charles' name quickly surfaced. And although he had cut his list recently, I still thought there might be a willingness for him to hear us out, knowing that there really wasn't a school east, really, of Butler on his list, knowing that he was from North Carolina, grew up in the heart of the ACC. And so Coach Gaudio made a couple phone calls, and lo and behold, I was able to get Charles on a FaceTime call on Friday. It lasted about an hour and 10 minutes or so. Thought we had a really healthy and productive conversation, talked about how there was such an immediate need with what had transpired with Jay the day before. And I think he was excited about the conversation, and that quickly turned to us scheduling a Zoom virtual visit with myself and Coach Gaudio for Saturday evening. And it was apparent that after we got off the virtual call with Charles' family, that there was even more interest. His dad texted me several times, and Charles did as well. And by late Saturday night, I felt like it could be moving in our favor, that they decided to speed up their decision date from sometime the following week to actually Sunday night. And Coach Gaudio and I had a few conversations, to say the least, that, hey, I think we may have really broken ground here and gotten through and shown him the opportunity that we had at Louisville. And so by about Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, I felt like, the decision was imminent that Charles was going to be a Cardinal on Sunday night, and that's exactly what happened.
Chris, from The Athletic here. What do both Charles and Carlik add specifically defensively?
Well, I think what they add first and foremost, Danielle, is experience. I think they add, both of them, an element of toughness. I think just in talking to coaches that coached against them and coaching staffs that battled against those guys for a number of years, they felt like both Charles and Carlik brought a lot of toughness to the table, both mentally and physically. Carlik's a guy that, really for his entire high school career was overlooked. And I'll be honest with you, I was one of those guys. He was right in my backyard, and obviously we didn't recruit him hard at Xavier. So always had a chip on his shoulder, always trying to prove people wrong. It was interesting in talking to Charles. He felt the same way. He actually had more offers out of high school as a senior than he did after his prep school year. And he had a great prep school year at Fork Union Military Academy. The team won a ton of games, and just the opportunities weren't there like they were out of high school. So both of them carry a chip on their shoulder. I think that's one of the biggest things that you can have defensively is a desire. I'd also tell you that they're both extremely smart, and they're excited about the challenge of playing here at the next level, up from where they played before. And so I'd like to think that they're going to bring that type of energy, that type of effort, which it takes from the defensive end, and a little bit of that spirit of, like I said, feeling like they were overlooked.
Matthew McGavick with Sports Illustrated here. Coach, was mental and physical toughness the main thing you sought out when looking in the transfer portal?
Well, we certainly needed help in the backcourt. When you graduate as many guys as we did, and you lose guys, both to transferring and a guy that had signed a national letter doesn't show. You're talking about a number of minutes that we needed to get replaced. So, we felt like one of the question marks of our team a year ago, although we had a great season, we were top 10 in the country almost the entire year. I can't tell you the number of articles that surfaced about our point guard play. And so that was something that we felt like with David's year of experience, going from freshman to sophomore year, that he'd be a much better player as a sophomore. And we also felt like we needed to get him and Josh some help, Josh Nickelberry. And so we ended up getting Carlik. And so that was a big part of it, a guy that can control the game, that plays at a great pace. It's a terrific decision maker, could score it. And then Charles provides that ability to guard the backcourt as well. And a guy that, as you saw in the West Coast Conference tournament, had a great tournament and had a really good career at San Francisco, scored a lot of points, and had to create a lot on his own. And again, with David and Carlik, I'd like to think that a lot of the creating in the backcourt can be done by those two guys, and Charles won't have as much on his plate. But we really needed help in the backcourt based on who we lost.
Chris, this is Ken Spencer with WHAS 11. Is it comforting at all to have maybe a little bit of familiarity with both of these players before they actually get on campus? For Carlik, he was at one of your camps. I think he mentioned growing up. And then for Charles, one of his mentors is Ish Smith, who played for Nina.
Yeah, I mean, those guys were very, very easy to vet. I think certainly you can find out what type of player they are by watching film, getting on the internet and checking out a few games, and maybe you have comparable matchups, teams that you played that they played. But I think just as important is when you take a guy, for 8 months to 12 months in your program, he's got to be the right fit. He's got to be a guy that can get along well with people, can quickly endear himself to his teammates, and it was really evident with those two and the people that we talked around him that they were those type of guys. And so, familiarity helps. We certainly do as much homework as I think probably the student athlete does on his end when he was looking at all the schools and talking to fellow coaches, maybe the guys that played for us. And that was a big help. And I think that's a huge key when you bring in a guy that, has college basketball experience, is older, has dreams and goals, and you want to make sure that those mesh with what you have in store for him.
Coach, this is C.L. Brown. I was curious your take on just kind of the bigger picture of college basketball right now. We just saw Jalen Green, some people's number one overall recruit, announcing he's going to go to the G League. And I was just wondering, the ripple effects of the G League option now and overseas options for kids, what kind of an impact you feel like that's going to have on college basketball moving forward?
I think it'll certainly have an impact. I feel like it'll be not the impact that maybe a story or two or the narrative becomes. I think it's a little bit more minimal than maybe what gets publicized. That there aren't many Jalen Greens, quite honestly, not only talent-wise, but for everyone that is as talented as Jalen and has the options that Jalen has, there's also guys that choose to go the college route. And so I don't see it becoming, something where you're talking about 25 to 30 guys a year, but more a handful of guys. And, I think you can go back in time and see that, there are always a handful of guys that didn't qualify academically. There's always a handful of guys that, maybe went a different route. But overseas, I don't think, especially in the world that we live in now, is an option that is as true in terms of it really happening a whole lot. I think the G League is doing a great thing for kids that just do not want to go to college. But I think there are a ton of kids that are still going to want to go to college and have the ability to play. And I do believe the NCAA, when we get through this coronavirus, is going to start making steps towards a name, image, likeness that can sort of maybe even that playing field. But, there are always going to be kids that want to go on to the pros. And I'm glad the G League's able to offer that opportunity for those very few select kids that can do that.
Coach, this is Josh Sullivan with the Lexington Herald Leader. We're curious if the program is involved in any sort of relief or charitable efforts with regards to the pandemic.
Well, it's a great question. I think the first thing that we're trying to do is wrap our head around when our guys can get back and be all together. It's a little bit difficult given the circumstances with guys being all over the country. Some of them not having access to a whole lot, making sure that they finish up classes the right way. And, from that standpoint, with our staff and with the administration at Louisville, we've looked at some things like doing a charity game, at some point if the NCAA were to allow that. I know in years past with tornadoes and things that have happened by Mother Nature, the NCAA has allowed schools to put on, games, exhibition games that raise a lot of money to help families and victims. So something of that nature would be awesome, I think, for college basketball. Obviously, I think all of us are involved with doing public service announcements and trying to, mitigate what's happening and bring down the curve, but flatten the curve, if you will. But as a team right now, it's pretty difficult because we're all in different times, different spaces around the country right now.
Thank you.
Chris, Michael McCammon from Cardinal Authority here. With the new additions, is there an effort to try to start getting them to, intermingle with the other guys on the roster, through Zoom or other, online activities?
Funny you say that. We actually introduced Charles and Carlik to the team via Zoom. You're not allowed to do any team activities, until those guys are fully enrolled here at school. But, we just gave them an introduction. And certainly they've shared phone numbers and, begun the process of, becoming new teammates with one another. But right now there's not a whole lot you can do, other than what we've done. And, we'll hopefully get our guys on campus at some point, who knows when.
Chris Spencer with WHAS 11 again. The last time we spoke to you a couple weeks ago, you mentioned the fact that Aiden was a little banged up at the end of the year. How is he right now, and what did you think of his freshman year? Was he getting better throughout the course of the year?
He was. Aiden came in really wholly unprepared at our level with all the things that go into being a college player. Just the sheer the work ethic, the intensity of the workload was all something that was very new to Aiden, as is the game of basketball. So I think going against Steve and Malik every single day, I think if you ask Aiden, he would tell you that he learned an awful lot. Where he was in January, February with practice was a lot different than what we saw in August and September when he first arrived. And that's a great thing. He's got a high ceiling. He's a guy that I think, has learned how to defend out on the perimeter, around the basket, much, much, much better than he could before. So we're really excited about, Aiden's progression. Obviously, the spring and summer stink because we'd love to be in the gym right now, getting better and working with him. He's in the epicenter right now of the coronavirus, being up in New York, which has me a little bit nervous for he and his family. But, he's finishing his rehab on his shoulder. I think every day he's getting closer to 100%. He's doing what he can conditioning-wise around the house and at a local track so that he can stay, out of harm's way when it comes to the virus. And when that time comes, when we get him back on campus with everybody else, we'll feel like he'd be in a much better spot than he was when he first arrived at campus.
Chris, this is Aaron Magnus with WDRB. I was just wondering, I know every program's going to be in the same situation with freshmen not getting that time potentially in the summer. Is that a concern to you? I've heard college coaches say it's such a crucial time for freshmen, or is it more of everyone's in the same boat this year?
Well, that's the, I don't want to say fortunate thing, but we could be in a situation where, if we were school down south and this was a hurricane, that maybe we weren't looking at return to school for, a month and a half, and maybe there'd be a competitive disadvantage with what some programs could do versus others. So we're all in the same uncharted territory together. I don't worry just about the freshmen. I worry about all of our players. The ability to, when they get back, get them in shape, and at the same time keep them healthy. And we're all older. We know what that means. If you ask me to run out there in front of my house and do a 50-yard sprint, I promise by about the 30 or 40th yard, I'd pop a hamstring. So, with our guys being relegated to their homes for a long period of time, whether they're a freshman or a senior, we've got to be really wise when we all come back together to make sure that, we get them in the best shape we possibly can as quick as we can without doing things that would put them in harm's way. Now, the learning curve, it's going to be tougher. I don't think there's any two ways about, seeing it differently. But that's okay. We'll deal with it. And like I said, it's an even playing field all around the country in that regard.
Coach Pat Jaggers here, ESPN Louisville. In regards to the 2021 recruiting cycle, with COVID-19 affecting AAU events, they're obviously not being an evaluation period right now because you can't go out and see those guys due to the virus. Are you concerned at all that might kind of create like a mad dash to evaluate guys once all this is over?
Well, I think like football staffs do, we spent a lot of time watching tape on student athletes that we didn't have maybe a chance to see during the year. My assistants did a great job throughout the course of the season at going and seeing a ton of different kids all over the country. And so we feel like we have as maybe good of a handle as we can on the 2021 class. I myself saw a lot of kids play throughout the year. But you would like to have seen them 4, 5, and 6 times, which is what April evaluations generally give you, which is what the June team camps allow you to do. The same thing with the July recruiting period. There will be a recruiting period, I believe. And now whether that is, remotely like we're doing now, where kids are playing sometime in July or August or September, who knows? But if not, then we'll have to do the best we possibly can, watching a ton of tape. And like I said, fortunately, we had a lot of kids on campus. And at the same time, saw a lot of kids play this year in the 2021 class.
Anything further for Coach Mack? Coach, I joined like a minute late with some connection problems. Michael McCammon again. You had mentioned last week still looking for a big guy. Could you, discuss that? And is that, an effort that is continuing with you guys?
It is. And, that would be the first area of need as we look. But, again, we're not going to fill the scholarship just to get a warm body in there. If we feel like there's no one that can help our team, then we feel like we have a good enough roster right now to be one of the better teams in the league and compete for a title like we did this past year. So, again, transfer portal changes every day. It's always fluid. It's our job as coaches to, continue to monitor that and figure out who would best fit our team if and when that person shows up in the portal.
Take 2 more for Coach.
Coach, this is Hayes Gardner with the Courier-Journal. Grad transfers have become increasingly common in the last few years, this year especially. Generally speaking, do you feel like this pattern is good for the game? Is it difficult to change the roster year after year? What's kind of your reaction, generally speaking, to the grad transfers?
Well, I think in a perfect world, you would have kids that arrive on your campus as freshmen, and they just sort of grow and they improve. You get better, and then down the line, those guys become your juniors and seniors. But roster volatility is a lot different in 2020 than it was 15, 20 years ago. I think there's more kids that transfer nowadays than ever before. You have more kids that leave early for the NBA than ever before. And on the horizon, you have a rule that could possibly change where kids wouldn't even have to sit out a year of residence. And so, whether I like it, whether we don't like it or not, I think it's reality. And, coming here at Louisville, we were very, very late in the game when it came to a freshman class. So when you look at our roster, we got hired at the end of March and early April. We didn't feel like there were any high school players that could help us at the level that they needed to compete in the ACC, knowing that most of those kids had already signed scholarships and committed. And so what we ended up doing was, going the grad transfer route. We won't have any juniors in the program this coming year, and that's a direct reflection of not having those freshmen, that the first year we got here. Tried to fill that void a little bit with a guy like Jay, knowing he'd be a junior. But again, sometimes the plans you have get altered a little bit. You look back and you say Jordan Wara, after his freshman year, was averaging 12 minutes a game. 2 years later, he's, heading to the NBA, and we're happy for him. But it affects our roster. Again, we first got here, and Lance Thomas took off. So now we're sitting there looking at one senior out of a class of 4, with Darius opting to get his degree and transfer. So, and I don't slight him for that, but we have to make sure that our roster stays as balanced as it can. And so there might be a necessity for a few years to have some grad transfers until we can continue to get on stable footing with the younger guys and continue to mow out rosters that have a little bit more balance from beginning to end.
One more for Coach, anyone?
Chris, this is Kent again with WHAS 11. I don't think we talked about Sam's freshman year. What did you think about him as a freshman and the jump that you'd like to see him take going into his sophomore season?
Yeah, I think Sam's poised to have a really big jump, from freshman to sophomore year. In many ways, one of the best things Sam does is score. He has a unique ability to get in the lane and rise up, get to his spot, use that 6'7" frame of him. He has a great touch in the lane. And, I think some of the things that he did well for us when he was playing well was he scored the ball. Now, when you come in to a program that has a guy like Jordan Wara, who's one of the elite scorers in college basketball, you have a guy like Ryan McMahon, maybe that's not necessarily what we need from Sam all the time. And if we do get that, we have to have the defensive effort, the defensive understanding. Because when you have a guy like Dwayne Sutton, he has that for 5 years. So, Sam at times had some really good moments. He also had some very freshman moments that we had to pull him off the floor, whether it was turnovers. And so, sometimes when you're a freshman or you're a guy that's maybe not playing, consistently 25, 30 minutes a night, you get a little tightened up thinking you have to prove yourself and do something that maybe puts you in a position where you're making more mistakes than you are making positive plays. But Sam's potential as a scorer for us is through the roof. I think he's shown that he can be a very good rebounder for us. And he's going to have to up his defense, and he knows it. He's more than capable. I think he grew as a freshman, and we're really looking forward to having Sam as a sophomore, thinking that he's going to do some big things for our team.
Great. Well, Coach, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it very much.